This Color Wheel Wednesday, we are looking at color wheels for quilters. Fiber artists of all stripes are a huge market for color wheels. Many of them are self-taught designers trying to solve a variety of color problems. So there are a bunch of quilters wheels out there, and it's hard to know where to start. So in this video, we'll organize them into three schools of thought. We'll call them the Itten school, the Ives school, and the perception-based school. First, the Itten school. These are art quilt and sewing color wheels that tend to have 12 hues with tints, tones, and shades. They're organized with red, yellow, and blue 120 degrees apart based on the color theory presented in Johannes Itten's 1961 Art of Color. Now, Itten didn't invent red, yellow, blue theory, the idea that those pigments would mix to produce all colors. That goes back to the 1600s. And the idea that you can harmonize colors with a wheel arranged around red, yellow, and blue begins with Moses Harris in 1769, but really takes off with Goethe's Farbenlehre in 1810. Itten repeats Goethe's ideas about color harmony in his 1961 book, but it's aimed chiefly at painters. So, why is Itten so influential among quilters?
It's always been the red, yellow, blue, three-pigment primary system that's been presented to quilters as the best way to use color.
To answer my questions about how quilters learn color theory, I called up Erika Mulvenna.
My name is Erika Mulvenna. I am a fiber artist and educator. My work primarily focuses on color interactions and takes the form of quilted wall hangings. And I teach sewing classes, quilting classes, and color classes.
The red, yellow, blue model goes back hundreds of years, but when does Itten's version enter into the discourse for fiber artists?
I have this great book that I found recently called Color for Quilters by Susan Richardson Kelby. So this is published in 1984. It reads like Itten's 7 contrasts of color and Itten's color harmony, but applied with fabric. All of the books quilters after this that talk about color follow the same formula. They talk about a 3-pigment primary wheel, and then they talk about it in the Itten terms of the 7 contrasts of color or the color harmonies, monochromatic, analogous, complement, split complement, blah, 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 blah.
Right, all pure Itten stuff. So in that context, let's take a look at this color wheel by Katie Fowler, called the Foolproof Color Wheel Set. It was published in 2020. You can see the 12 hues, tints, tones, and shades, and if we pull out these masks, the idea is you can isolate different combinations of hues based on Goethean and some non-Goethean intervals. Fowler is an artist who, after a career as an elementary school teacher, found her true calling as an art quilter and creativity coach. Her color wheel set was published by C&T Publishing, who also published her Foolproof Color Workbook and a follow-up 2022's Foolproof Art Quilting. And this set made a brief splash. It was C&T's bestseller when released and was featured as a must-have in the fall 2020 issue of Creative Machine Embroidery magazine. But now, 6 years later, the Foolproof Wheel is out of print, and perhaps it's just as well because it's a retread. The 1986 Itten Color Star. It's based on a lithograph that Itten did back in 1921 in his Bauhaus days, but it's actually created by his second wife, German textile designer Anneliese Itten, who did much to preserve Itten's legacy after his death in 1967. Anyway, you can see that the Foolproof wheel, despite some minor differences, is essentially the same product. But quilters' wheels of the Itten school have been around since before Fowler's 2020 adaptation, so we should also talk about Gloria Tracy and Susan Levin. These business partners, active since the 1990s, I believe, co-wrote books, developed a number of products for fiber artists, and that included this, the Pick, Point, and Match Rainbow Color Selector, patented in the year 2000. It's commonly known as the Dritz color wheel because Tracy and Levin licensed the design to Dritz, a manufacturer of sewing tools and notions. Tracy and Levin hold 3 separate patents for their color picking system, but interestingly, the key feature of this wheel, the holes for comparing fabric against tints and shades arranged around each hue, that was first done by Leona Rocha Wilson back in 1977 in her early days, before she designed for Butterick and hosted a TV show for Simplicity. Before all that, she had her own company, Fashionetics, and that company published this wheel. She also marketed a version directly to quilters. Wilson simplifies the Goethean color harmonies into colors that blend, colors that contrast, triad colors, and to add excitement, and neutral and monochromatic schemes. But in the end, it's again a 12-tone wheel with Itten's primaries and secondaries defining the hue spacing. And many fiber artists like Erika have tried the red, yellow, blue system and found that they weren't adequate.
That's where I started with my own journey and made a couple quilts in that system, and it just didn't feel right to me. But I couldn't find anything that would answer my question, like, why should I use the RYB system? Why is this the best? Why are these color harmonies what they are?
So what did you do?
So I went through multiple iterations of color wheels. I went through the CMY wheel.
Let's pause there a second, though, because this brings us to the second school of thought in color for quilters, the Ives school. Like Erika, the quilt artist Joen Wolfrom definitely felt the Itten school was missing something. Here's her essential color wheel companion. You can see that it's not a red, yellow, blue wheel. She has spaced yellow, magenta, and turquoise at 120-degree intervals. And interestingly, like the Fowler foolproof wheel, it's also published by C&T. But while this is essentially a CMY wheel, she doesn't use the term cyan, and for a very specific reason. As early as 1992, in her book, The Magical Effects of Color, she was calling the CMY system the Ives system, and she's referring back to a guy named Herbert Ives, an early 20th century color scientist.
Herbert Ives is like the most influential color theorist for quilters that never wrote a book. He was a scientist who was also a painter. He wanted to have a more perfect palette. So he ends up finding some pigments that work. So then he patents what he calls a color chart. So his color chart is shaped like a hexagon, and in 3 equidistant positions, he has cyan, yellow, and magenta.
Neither Erika nor I have found any evidence that Ives's chart was ever commercially produced or sold to artists. So how did Wolfram come to connect Ives's name with her turquoise, magenta, yellow color wheel? A few sources on arts and crafts of the 1970s and 80s mention the elusive Ives color wheel, so there had to be a source. And I think it was our old friend Faber Birren, the prolific color expert we talked about in episode 3. In his 1961 book, Creative Color, he presents what he calls the Ives wheel and says the Ives color circle has its primaries in magenta red, yellow, and turquoise blue. That's page 18. And this is the earliest source naming Ives as the originator of a TMY, turquoise, magenta, yellow wheel. Important point. As we look at Wolfram's Birren-inspired wheel, the CMY system has repercussions beyond just what you call your primary colors. By positioning magenta here, 120 degrees away from yellow, red has to be pushed toward yellow. In some ink-based CMY systems, that actually means pushing red all the way to the secondary color position, and this is what digital RGB CMY wheels do. But a lot of earlier CMY systems, like Birren's 1930 wheel and Harold Cooper's rhombohedron, actually keep orange in that secondary position, and that is what Wolfram has done. And that puts orange across from turquoise, aka cyan, instead of the usual CMY position of red across from cyan. The resulting complement pairs are somewhat truer to human vision than red, yellow, blue wheels. The resulting range of vibrant colors is a bit wider than in the RYB model, since we have the fully vibrant magenta and cyan anchoring cleaner mixtures. And a lot of people in the fiber arts community really like it.
I think it's popular because there are different colors in it and more colors, and the colors are vibrant.
Yeah.
As opposed to like the RYB wheel.
But you tried the CMY system, and did it work for you?
I kind of felt the same thing with it, like I feel restricted.
So where do we go from here?
I started reading more about perception, and that's when I discovered the idea of opponent process. And then I noticed, looking at other iterations of like the cone-opponent wheel, like Ostwald's wheel, and then there's others that are more modern. I somehow just fell in love with Ostwald's system. That process, you know, psychological or neurological process, was what was informing how the colors would react together in quilts. So in other words, the highest contrast between colors are opposite each other on that color wheel. And so I kind of made my own.
So we've made it to the third school of thought here, that choosing colors for fabric projects should be done on a perceptual model of color. The reasoning is simple. We're not mixing paints, are we?
When you're a quilter and you're using color as like a collage artist because you're not painting, if you understand what this represents, you're no longer thinking as a painter. Like, you're no longer thinking, what mix is this? Or what's the tint or the tone or the shade? You're thinking more in terms of perception and value or lightness, hue and vividness or chroma.
Let's take a closer look at Erika Mulvenna's 2022 visual contrast color wheel. You can see at the center, instead of Itten's primary color triangle and secondaries, Erika has 4 psychological primaries here, reflecting her research into the cone-opponency model. Most systems like this will tend to put yellow opposite a deep blue. That's what Ostwald did and the NCS system in Sweden, but Erika's opposites are more similar to the DIN 6164 system, which we talked about in episode 7. And I really like very much how Erika's system is based on a variety of research into perceptual opposites and the opponent process theory, not just a copy of Ostwald or another system. Unfortunately, Erika's wheel is currently out of print.
I was having some production issues.
Yeah.
It's not currently in production, and I'm looking for someone to help me update it.
So what are you using in your color theory workshops currently?
When I do teach with students, sometimes we use paper and we make what is a close approximation. And I do tell them these papers we're using are not perfect, but it's close enough for you to understand.
Are you using Color Aid or something else?
I'm not using Color Aid. I'm using printer paper, a pack of printer paper. It's the Astro Brights.
Oh yeah.
I'm teaching community classes through a local art center. It's perfect because it's like affordable. Out
of curiosity, I bought the Spectrum pack of Astro Brights papers and measured them with my spectrophotometer. It turns out that this pack of papers includes 8 pairs of colors that, measured in a perceptual color space, OKLCH, are nearly perfect visual complements. It's all close enough to give us a 16-hue wheel of visual contrast with reasonably even spacing between hues, a great cheap-to-make tool for the type of teaching Erika is doing. But it's important to note here, as a teacher, Erika feels the same way I do about all of these competing color systems. Maybe to us, using a color order system based on scientifically measured visual contrasts makes more sense, but many people still prefer Itten wheels or the Ives wheel, and everybody's color theory journey is different, and that's okay.
Like, when it comes to the quilting aspect, if someone has a method or a tool and they're happy with it, I'm not saying,
Right.
Stop what you're doing.
Yeah, stop. You're wrong. Right. I completely agree. A color theory teacher's job, whether in quilting or painting, is to open the student up to more possibilities, not cut some possibilities off. And I think Erika's own journey as an art quilter is a valuable model. Quilters are working with visual contrast, not pigment mixing, and that changes what a color wheel is even for. Why would you want to work with a tool that was built for a different creative job than the one you're trying to do? Thanks for hanging out. If you're a quilter or fiber artist, I'd love to hear your take on all of this in the comments. And I'll see you on the next Color Wheel Wednesday.